Watch, and we'll call the meeting of the Village Trustees of North Bennington to order. It's Tuesday, October 12th, 2017, 7:02, just said that. And the first thing we'll do is review and approve minutes of September the 12th, and continuation meeting from September 26th. So I'll give people a second to just briefly look at the notes from those meetings.
I have only one comment. Actually, to the September 25th, the only thing is I already sent it. It says will send, and I already sent.
And you already sent them,
Yeah, a
okay.
couple months ago.
Okay.
Here, let's do that.
Yep, that'd be great, thanks.
Was that the
And that's the,
26th or 25th?
25th.
Okay.
All right, so this would be, and the Tuesday was September 25th, correct?
Yeah. Did you catch that? It was a minor note that I made on the 25th in the next to the last sentence right here. It says will send, and I already sent them.
He has sent specific ordinances to the trustees.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's no adjustments other than that, I would entertain a motion to accept both the notes from both the Tuesday, September 12th meeting and Tuesday, September 25th meetings.
I will make a motion to accept the Tuesday, September 12th minutes, and in addition, the continuance until the minutes from the continuance of September 25th.
I second it.
And without any further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. And I'll just state also for the record that we do, being a 5-member board, we do have a quorum to conduct business tonight with 3 members being present. So we'll also review the monthly warrant and approve the payment of the bills. So, and those were attached to an email sent to us by Mary Monday, I think?
Yes, and so the first warrant will be your payroll warrant.
Okay.
There you go. That looks a lot longer than it usually is, but it's only because the first 4 checks for Max we had discussed them last time, but hadn't yet been generated. So I'm putting them on here so you see check numbers, etc. But this payroll actually runs through 11/10, which is the Friday before the next meeting, which is what Lori does now. We'll get them out so you can see them in advance.
Okay. And I entertain a motion to approve that October 13th to November 10th payroll warrant.
I'll make a motion that we approve the payroll warrant in the amount of $7,965.40.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. So I'll go ahead and sign this one.
And your next one is the regular operating warrant.
Okay.
That one comes up to a total, including the withholding and payroll taxes due the quarter for Vermont, the previous month for federal, total of $21,758.78. And let's see, was there anything unusual in there?
Is this the one that has the detail or?
This, yes, there is a detail of all of that beyond that as to what the individual, where the individual items fall within the general ledger.
Okay.
And some memo on virtually all of them as to the detail as to what it is.
What is positive promotions?
That's a fire
Those are-
department.
Those are the things, the fire department comes to the school for a day, and they do a fire safety program, and they purchase little hats for the younger children, and pencils and rulers, and they'll have safety messages on them.
Right.
It's a really nice
That's
program.
great.
So that's what that's for.
Sounds good, thank
Yeah.
you.
If there's no further review or discussion, I'd entertain a motion to approve the regular warrant in the amount of $21,758.78.
I'll make that motion to approve that amount for the October 10th warrant.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. Good.
Yes.
Okay. And the reconciliation report and the sweeps were for our information purposes?
Yes, I'll comment on that when I get to
Okay.
my section.
Right, great. Okay. So does that conclude the warrants and
That's
payments of
the
the bills?
two warrants.
Okay. So number 3 is in citizen comments. Okay, I'll wait until. And there's no citizens here, so we will move on to the treasurer's report.
Okay, so the only thing I wanted to note today is that, you know, when we were filling out the assessment, the risk assessment for the grant that we have for the new backhoe, and then also once a year fill out just a query, a questionnaire for VLCT for our insurance renewal. I noticed that there's questions, and also I had to do one recently for the water department. There's always a question in there about does someone other than the person who reconciles accounts open a bank statement? You know, in this day and age of everything electronically, paper statements are almost a moot point. However, it serves a purpose. And I think the bigger issue is it's not indication of a fatal flaw, but as a point of risk mitigation, having someone, Lori and I, prepare the checks, mail the checks, enter the bills, things like that. I reconcile the accounts for you just because we want to make sure that, you know, we've got enough funds to go forward. So it just occurred to me that number one, at least sharing the reconciliations with you, you'll be able to see what activity is going back and forth, because basically the reconciliation is a matching exercise. Is what is in QuickBooks or whatever your electronic record keeping is that what the bank says? So you're doing this matching. I could also give you copies of bank statements, but that wouldn't tell you if that's what we're recording either. So I figure just starting with this, at least you can see an indication of the activity that goes in and out. And I've included the major accounts. The primary account, obviously, is our operating account. That's the one that all the checks get written out of. And if you looked through that and you wanted to track it back to a warrant, you'll never find an invoice on there or a check number on there that you won't find on. And then you'll see the other little things, you'll see the tax payments come out of there and things like that. So we have a sweep account, our operating account, we only keep $5,000 in there. But every day as checks come in, they sweep money out to cover the checks and then sweep it back at night. It increases our interest, and should you ever bump a limit, so where you're not covered by FDIC, well, now you are with these accounts. And we do the same thing with the tax account. Now, the tax account only comes into play at this time of year from now until November. And then we remit most of the taxes we collect to MAU and the graded school district. But in the meanwhile, money is coming in, sits in there, and it goes in. So that gives you, by looking at that, it gives you an idea of what tax revenues have been coming in too. And then the payroll account, which is the other one, because Lori writes those checks and signs those checks. We at least have that check and balance there, in that I get that reconciled. But again, if you were to look at those reconciliations and track back to a warrant, you won't find anything there. So that's just a start of I guess, thinking ahead to if we were to develop a more comprehensive or more current accounting and financial policy. This would be one thing it would include. So I thought easy enough to just start with that small measure and go ahead from there. Don agreed to actually receive bank statements and be able to open them up. Now, I did run into a little bit of a snag with doing that, and a community bank is trying to figure that out for us, because right now records are electronic.
Oh.
And we're not sure you can do both. You either agree to take electronic records or you agree to take paper records. If we took all paper records, I'd never have things reconciled in time for this meeting.
Right.
Because you're waiting until sometimes the 10th of the month to get your mail in. Yeah. And we often meet ahead of that. So there are some things that we're checking on. But if we can duplicate things, the other snafu was, could they put it in the address of something other than the legal address? So that might be an issue. But what we can do is, if I can duplicate and have a paper record and an electronic record, I would simply get the envelopes, hand them to you, you could open them up, then you could verify
Sure.
you know, some of the activity, at least top line, bottom line, with what I'm presenting on the reconciliation reports.
Are the electronic records sent to you by email, or are
No.
they're just available for your
It's
inspection?
password protected, just much like you would go on to any bank site,
Right.
have a secure login and email to do that.
So
And then
they prepare a statement monthly, but
There's a
it's just
statement.
available to you. It's
Correct.
not given to you.
no, correct.
Huh.
And those statements, if anybody does their banking electronically, you know, you get those statements just like that generally, which is very helpful in trying to timely reconcile your accounts. Then the third thing would be simply to let one or several of you, we could probably create an online, a password where you could go online and peruse them yourself.
Can you view what you're, I mean, can you print what you're seeing online, like print it to PDF?
I do it all the time.
Then would it be possible, like you're talking about who actually receives them?
Yes,
'cause I think-
yes,
Sorry, the issue with the risk assessment and the sort of more than one set of eyes is that if you've got, if you're writing the checks and receiving and having the access to the account, but you're also preparing the reconciliation or the document for the trustees to inspect, that's not really a check.
Right.
Because it's all being prepared
Right.
by the same person.
there is a possibility, there is a risk
Yeah.
that someone could hide something.
Right.
Someone could borrow money in and out of an account during a month, and if you didn't see it, you'd be none the wiser.
Right.
Our accounts generally aren't that big, that things could happen, but that's not the point. The point of a risk assessment or a risk mitigation is to prevent things. Not that any one of us in this room or hopefully village at large would commit any fraud, but it's always there for the overall protection, not to indict an individual.
Right. I think it's a great idea to put in place the standard accounting procedures as best we can to avoid that risk, regardless of whether, I think we all trust each other, and it's a small town, like you say, but we want to put things in place because it's the right thing to do, not necessarily because we have to or something.
Yes. So, working on it, it just occurred to me middle of the month that, gosh, after filling out that thing 3 times, thinking, there's got to be a way that we can come up and do this. So, I appreciate your willingness to take those things, and one way or the other, we'll have that, we'll get that done.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you for that additional information this month. I think it's really helpful.
And the only other thing I did want to comment on is that this week is the end of when people can change or file their homestead adjustments. So if any taxpayer has received a tax bill, which every taxpayer should have a tax bill at this point, but if anyone has one and feels it is incorrect, they have only this week to get that filed. So I would encourage anyone to look at the back of the tax bill. There is a taxpayer number on there, and call immediately and get those things updated.
With Vermont Department of Taxes.
With the Vermont Department of Taxes. I can't file people's homesteads. I can't just change tax bills without having that. The state will send one more funding of homestead adjustments, and that is on November 1st.
And can I ask too, I'm assuming if you're one that you receive your tax bill and then you just immediately stick it in your desk, don't look at it because your mortgage or your bank pays that for you, that's the situation where you want to look at it.
That is a great thought, thank you.
Because
Yes.
you apply for your homestead,
Yes.
you assume that you get it every year, and when your money is paid, you see that you do, but now's the time to actually check to make sure that the number's right, and if it's not, call them.
Perfect,
To make
yes.
sure, so.
Yes, because a great many people do have their bills paid through an escrow, and no municipality knows who has what escrow company, so all bills only go to the individual, and then the escrow companies will contact the municipality to get a list of their taxpayers. So even at that rate, I'm only going to report what I know is on the grand list,
Right.
and the tax bill, not what maybe was before or not. So, yeah, that's a good point. And then by this meeting next time, I'll have a big poster board on the windows with the times to collect taxes in person. And that also goes in the newspaper, and I put it in the post office and on Lori's board for people who walk around the building.
Okay. Very good. How about the highways and facilities report?
Well, we're working on our backhoe grant. We've got the last of our demo units, which is Case, John Deere, JCB, and CAT. CAT's the last one to show up. We should have our bid specs all done, hopefully by the end of the week. We're just waiting on the grant people to have a signed a grant agreement, so then we can send the bid out and actually go in it. So that's moving along, and then we'll see. I think we're going to be very surprised in the numbers that show up in a good way. Leaf welfare.
Can I make one
Yes.
comment to that? I know that last meeting we had talked about your pleasure with the JCB at that time, but I noticed that I think Dick Pembroke might have a machine that's either that one or very similar to that.
He
So
does it, JCB.
Okay, that's great. Sounds like you already knew that, but if anybody had one and had a comment either way, it might be interesting to know.
Really had one for quite some time.
Good.
You know, so, well, I mean, a lot of them well over the numbers. So
Sure.
we'll see what happens.
Yep, okay, thank you.
So as a former resident, used to affectionately call Leaf Welfare, has started. Again, we've got some people, again, one of your neighbors, maybe need to get educated to see that pile. It's a big mess. I'm not wrecking people's lawns. It's not happening. I don't care. You know, we do it on Mondays and Tuesdays. Leaves in a pile, one pile, not a big long line, on the back of your house. Needs to be next to the street, not in the street, not on the sidewalk. There's a few minor cases that we do case by case because of, you know, Mrs. Novak, there's really no place there to do it, so we back up in their driveway. But again, don't wait till the last minute, get them out early.
That goes through what date?
To the first week in November. Period.
Yep,
Not maybe.
I was asked to ask you. I'll make sure I reiterate that.
Because we have a few things. One, we're gonna get rid of that truck with that stuff's
Yep.
running around, and the longer we wait into the winter, the less value that comes to us. So with that, we're well on our way to that. We've already picked up a couple, about probably 10, 12 piles around the bills. So we,
Sorry.
Yep.
So that's a significant expense to us at this time of year, and I think what I know that you've told me is that having everything in a single pile saves us money because you're not spending your time going around the whole pile and trying to get it. That's the best way that this machine and this crew handles it, is in one pile. And if it's going to rain or something like that, throw a tarp over it.
that's correct.
Keep it dry. And you know, it's not. This isn't something that's like just a municipal service that we budget in. It's like it's an additional thing that obviously. Right. Okay. And then the other thing would be, if you have a big pile, or if you're in an area that's not traveled all the time, to call ahead.
Yep.
Is that, what's the number for the
It's
garage?
442-7474.
7474, and just give a call to Norm if you have one ready so he can schedule it.
Actually, we prefer it.
Yeah.
To call that, I mean, only on this one. But again, if it's gonna rain, if they're gonna get wet, they're gonna get snowed on,
Carpet.
you know, we've had that before, and, you know, we'll discuss those if it happens.
Yeah.
But it's ridiculous to try to pick them up when they're wet and frozen, and,
Yeah.
you know, it's just, we have, in the village, again, with our small department, we have a lot more important things to do at this time of year to get ready for winter than rain people's yards.
Thank you for
So that being said, we move on to here. We did have an exterminator. I don't know if the bill came in, we had an exterminator here. There was a humongous colony of bees that decided to move into our luggage compartment down here. Wasps. They weren't honeybees, because if not, we had a beekeeper gonna come and take them out of there. So we got rid of those. We've spent just about every day here trying to vacuum up those box elder bugs that are horrible. If I find a tree, I'm going to remove it. We're sick of it. There hasn't, well, maybe there's been a little momentum. Speaking about this building and our grant for the roof, nothing to really speak of right now, unless John wants to has any more knowledge that I haven't had yet today. But I mean, those wheels are slowly turning. But we're probably going to deal with a tarp roof for the winter. We've got some other eve issues. I mean, we're going to have to really decide that, you know, find a grant writer or somebody to look for grants for this historical building, or you're gonna have to put some serious money in it. I encourage all of you to come up here during the day and take a walk around the building and look up, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm more than happy to meet you here, so we can see things. So that being said, move on to where, the truck, it's been ordered. We'll see when it gets here. We've got a couple different options for a plow, as I discussed. We wanted to buy one, not exactly like we have on the gray truck, but the back half all exactly the same, so we can take those plows and switch them. So I have the price from one of the vendors for that, so that's coming in, that's not too bad at all. And that's pretty much about it. We got Park Street cleaned up pretty well. It's pretty flat, nice, except for any excavation with the water line going. We'll deal with that in a case-by-case basis. That should be pretty set for winter, except for picking up the leaves on the street, again in the gutter. So, I think, I'm sure I'll think of something else. But.
Okay. Well, feel free to chime in if you've forgotten anything.
But the big thing is, this building obviously it's getting some use. There'll be a parade. We've got all the wood for the bonfire already collected through the year. So.
Very good. Thank you. And I didn't say thank you to you, but thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Question, when, I noticed that there was a deposit made on the cameras. When is that?
Well, if the check's written, the check got approved tonight. As soon as he gets it, he'll order the stuff, and a week or so later, he'll start installing. He does a 70% thing, and I missed it when I was looking at that. We're just 70 and 30 upon completion, because he's a small business. And if I'd known that, we could probably prove that night, and he got that check from us.
I just wasn't sure if it's days, weeks, or what.
No, it's pretty, he said he had the stuff within a week to 10 days from when he got that check. And, I would say that, our target was hopefully to have it installed by Halloween over the park, and he might have one camera sitting there, and maybe, plug in the recorder over there inside the lock building. Okay. And then work on getting it all moved over here.
Good.
But, so.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we have a report from the Development Review Board. So we'll...
But I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just full of questions tonight. The gentleman, and I forget his name, who's filling in for... Has he had any time? Because he hasn't submitted any hours?
I'm sure he has. And he may not know that, Mary.
Okay.
So why don't I send him an email?
Yes, I know. Oh, don't send him this way. Yeah, I
let me send him
remember
an
we
email.
talked about it when he was here, but it's those things.
Are you connected with him?
No, I
So
know
I'll
I sent him an email
and
once.
I'll
Yeah, I
CC
just
you.
don't want to get behind
Yeah.
on him. Okay.
I know he has, 'cause he's been incredibly busy, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And there was an issue with the next agenda item is the fire department. They can't be here tonight, but I did speak to them before the meeting. They have expressed a concern that there were stipulations made as part of the Act 250 review process at the Water Street building, and I'll recognizing that there is a process in place for the fire safety in the buildings and in buildings like that to be checked by the state fire marshal. So understand that process is in place. So there is, fire safety checking going on at the building. They would like the trustees to look into to either check in with the fire marshal or some other official to make sure that the stipulations that were agreed to or that they feel are necessary are being complied with in that situation. I think that's reasonable, and I think that we can take that on as an inquiry.
Should we funnel that back through the Act 250 group? I think Ruth Bodsow handled that, right? And she handled the Act 250 approval process.
Probably,
so at least if we funneled it back through her, she'd have the records and maybe able to direct.
Right, and I mean, I don't want to presume anything on either side. I think that it's, you know, it's important that the promises be honored and things like that, but that also, you know, that we're not intervening in a process that's already in place and has been complied with. So I think there's, you know, but I think it's reasonable to, you know, you trust but verify, you know.
There has to be, that's why I would ask Ruth or somebody there, because there has to be an established way for someone to preside over a compliance concern to determine whether or not it's valid. And if it is, then how to remedy that. And I have no idea what that is, but that would be my first guess, would be to contact them.
Okay.
Does that sound like the right idea, or do you have?
Yeah, and I'm sure, and I think that I went to at least one meeting in that process, and she did chair the committee that was running that review process, so I'm sure that if she's not the person to contact, that she will put me in touch with the person to contact.
Perfect, okay, so that makes sense.
I can make that inquiry.
Thank you.
Ruth, did you say?
Yeah, Ruth Bodsow. If you don't have her email.
I was on the list. They send a copy of everything to anybody that attended the meeting and put their email in, so I have an email from her, I'm sure. Any other issues relating to the fire department? No. The water board, I don't think we have a report from them tonight either. They have I think, is it a monthly meeting or?
Next
So-
Tuesday.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions or concerns about the water department, they can attend that meeting. And then as far as new business, there are two things that I have and that were warned for tonight relating to the grants that we have. One being the depot roof project. Let's see. Okay, here we go. All right, the depot roof repair project, and I have an identification number here of TAP-TA14, subsection 9. We have an agreement under that grant to pay the BCRC, the Bennington County Regional Commission, for their services that they provide us, essentially in administering that grant. And so without the BCRC, we would not be able to accept these grants because they do all the work to prepare it and negotiate with the state or the railroad or the any right-of-way issues with property owners, things like of that nature. They handle all they work with the engineers so that we can complete these projects and accept the grant monies to do that. So, in other words, without that, we could still do our projects, but we'd just be paying for the whole thing because we wouldn't get the grant money to do it. So, I think it's a really valuable service. But that said, these two amendments that we're going to be, or that we are being asked to sign tonight, are just adjusting the payments under the same grants that we've received. So they're not asking us to increase our share or increase the total amount paid or increase our grant request. It's just an adjustment to payment, especially now that we have noticed that we've received our additional funding in both of these grants. So with the depot roof project, there's, let's see. The total amount to be paid to the BCRC for all services is not expected to exceed $3,000 plus the $9,000 previously expended. So the total for the services for this project would be $12,000, which is within the funds that are already approved. So there are contingencies. There's a 10% contingency fee, or a contingency allowance under the grant, as well as other line items that may not have been as much as we had anticipated. So they're asking that we approve an additional $3,000 that wasn't in their line item to begin with. But they have, as I understand it, probably already expended all of that. So they're going to, even though they're only asking for $3,000 more, they're probably going to be doing a substantial amount of work for free anyways.
And this will draw $3,000 into the contingency set aside. Is that right? It's there that's assigned to contingency right now, which this may very well be a good application for contingency. I'm just curious.
I think that's the case, is that right now the line item for BCRC is $9,000.
Okay.
And what they're asking to do is to change that to 12. So they're asking for an additional 3 to be allocated to them. And that would, and the total grant would not be changed, but other line items would be adjusted so that could be.
Okay.
And it wouldn't have, but obviously not the payment to the contractor that does work, because they'd have to have whatever their bid comes in at.
I'm fine.
Okay. And that
Do you need a
is-
motion for that one? Or how do you
Yes,
do this?
I think I need a motion for both of these, but the first one is that, yeah, go ahead.
Motion to amend the payment to BCRC, showing an increase of $3,000 to $12,000 for the Depot Street Roof Project, grant writing and project management. That's what that is.
I second it.
Okay, so without further discussion, any in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye, and there's none opposed. So I'll go ahead and sign that. Okay, it's recorded as being approved in the minutes for today. It looks like the document requires the signature of a trustee. I don't know, it doesn't have lines for all the trustees, but if one is, if they need more than one signature, I'm sure that Jim will let me know, and I'll
Okay.
get, and so moving on to the, okay, and then, so, and as far as we had discussed the time frame on the depot roof project, I do know that the bid documents are being put together and are supposed to be going out very soon. We don't have a final bid document yet, but it looks like because it's later in the year, there's a concern that the contractors wouldn't come back with bids if they were constricted. If the bid document says you have to have it done by, November 15th or whatever, December 1st, that we wouldn't get any bids on the project. So BCRC is saying the bid should have a spring 2018 date so that we'll get bids, which is not to say that we can't ask the contractor what their schedule is and see if we can schedule it sooner than that. So, you know, not that any contractor is listening tonight, but if there's any way, you know, somebody would be able to fit that in their schedule, you know, that bid document should be coming out very shortly, so please take a look at it and see if your company could do that. Okay, so moving on to the Upper Main Street sidewalk project. So this has been dormant for a while because last year we applied for additional funds. We had been awarded a grant in 2014 to do an Upper Main Street sidewalk project. So essentially from here, from the railroad tracks up to the village line on both sides. There was a small section in front of Kevin's as well, but that's already been addressed this year. So it would just be from here up to the village line on both sides. And so that had been approved, but then when, after it had been approved, we went back to the, I don't know if this is the engineers or whoever comes up with the construction cost estimates were way more than what we had been granted. So it was something like, we had originally thought it was gonna be 160 or 170 and ended up, we needed 225. So last year I applied for the additional funds to cover the entire project and we didn't get it, which was a little confusing and frustrating because if they'd already approved it once, you know, and you're applying for additional funds, it's unclear, you know, why they would, but, you know, a lot of projects applied but in any case, we applied again this year and we've just been given notification that we were approved this year. So very happy about that.
Good.
Right? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John.
And so that project will move forward, and we had a meeting here the other day with a new project manager from V-Trans who is, I don't know what the motivation is. It sounds like this is probably a smaller project, but his motivation is to move it, to expedite it and move it as quickly as possible, which works great for us. And it sounds like it will be able to be coordinated with V-Trans and their paving project next summer as well, so that we can potentially get our sidewalk in before they do it. We want to do it before the paving, correct?
That's correct.
So we want to put our sidewalk in before the paving so that they can pave right up to the sidewalk, as opposed to if you pave first and then we do the sidewalk, then there's likely a gap in between the two.
Or a joint.
What's that?
A joint.
A joint, okay. So it wouldn't be as nice. So that's a lot of good news. And that project has, because we didn't get the grant last year, VCRC's just been plugging away, and they're way over budget on that one. So they're obviously asking for an adjustment as well on that one. And that actually does, we do need to approve the change here, but I actually wrote in the additional amount to that grant, the amended grant, or the additional grant, so that one should be from the same line item. I'm not really sure.
So it's not taken out of like a contingency?
Yeah, I think that additional amount's been approved, but we'll, the request here is the total paid to BCRC for all services is not expected to exceed 5,000 plus the 14,726 previously expended. So their max under the old grant was 14,726. I think that must have been a percentage or something. I'm not sure why it wasn't 15,000, but they're asking for additional 5, so that's a total of $19,726. And I would entertain a motion to approve that amendment.
I'll make a motion to approve the additional $5,000 to BCRC for the Upper Main Street project.
Okay.
I second it.
And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. So we're making it easy for Lori tonight with all the motions and seconds.
So is that a project that maybe can be done this winter? Or did you say they'll coordinate it
It's-
in the spring?
Right.
when
Spring
Okay.
goodness.
Yeah. That wouldn't be a winter project.
Now, how long would that take? How long would that?
You know what, it's, there's a couple variables, one is the heads, right up here. It's, geez, where, is it? I wanna say down or it's not. But anyway, the big heads,
Yeah, yeah.
well, we met with the new homeowner, the previous resident had passed away and his son took the place over. And he is by no means attached to that hedge whatsoever. He would like something in front of his property, but he was very, we had a very good discussion about moving it. And the state was really happy that the village wants to take on that, and so we don't have to deal with any other right-of-way issues. So I think we can settle that with the homeowner and get that moved before this starts. So, you know, that's gonna have to wait till spring, so, you know, once a company comes in, if it's a small guy, you know, it could take a couple weeks. If it's a big guy, it could blow right through it. I mean, look at our other pieces of sidewalk, 100 feet, and that's with us excavating them out. I mean, 3 days, they're back and they're done. With the contractor we hired for both of those. So, and he's more than, his crew more capable of doing the sidewalk than we are. And, you know, and so are many others that we have.
John, I don't remember, were these 10 or 20% village cost projects? And the reason I ask is if these go into spring, then these will be covered in our next budget, so we'll have to make sure that any of our costs we get into our next budget. Pardon? You think it's 20? Okay. I just don't remember. I know I could, John, if you don't have it right off the top of your head, I can go look at the house.
Well,
he's right. I think the
I
roof
should-
is 20 anyway.
You think they're both? Okay.
Well, I know that the additional money that we just applied for is 20.
Then the
So-
original one was 20 as well, so, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. Well,
Is that-
we'll just have to I just want to make myself a mental note to make sure that when we look at our budget, since that will be coming up in only a couple of months, that we put in whatever costs we'll have to absorb for both of these projects. And I'm guessing that by then we'll have a better idea of exactly what they'll cost. It's fine, I can go.
I don't
Okay,
know.
no problem.
I mean,
I can go look it up. I just didn't know if you knew off the top of your head.
yeah, the original, the only question that I would have is that the original sidewalk grant was under the 2013 bicycle and pedestrian program. So that was quite a while ago, and I know that they did move, some of the grant programs moved from 10 to 20. And I don't, so I don't want to say for certain that I know that the original
Okay.
one was 20. But I mean, obviously, if it's 20 now, it stands to reason that it would have been 20 before
Yeah.
for the original. But you know, I would want to check that out because obviously that would be a big difference. So
But whichever way it comes out, we'll just have to make sure that when we do our budget, we
Right.
can cover these.
If I wanted to find
Okay. All right, so that covers my part of the new business. Anybody else have new business to attend to,
I don't think so.
or any old business?
I'm gonna jump on the old business for
Sure.
1 second and ask if either of you two read any of the Bennington ordinances yet.
I did, yes.
Not that I want to harp on it, but if we could, I have 2 or 3 that seem obvious to me, and I'd like to actually begin the process with some easy ones, figuring out how we might move to a vote. Like actually be able to figure out how the language might work in a cover letter as a practical experiment, making the others easier. And I don't want to hijack the rest of the meeting, but if you had, it would be good to make some progress.
I think that
I have a document that's several years old that would.
All right, thank you.
I think we don't have too much other business to handle. Is there items we need to discuss in executive session today? Or?
No, none of us, I don't believe.
So it wouldn't be hijacking, is
Okay.
my point. I think we can go ahead and talk
Okay.
about that. I think it's important.
Well, I wanted to throw out just as an idea, looking at, and I have one extra sheet here.
I'm sorry.
These were my
I
notes.
did bring my notes
Yeah.
last time, but apparently I don't have them today.
I was
But I do
looking,
remember.
I was thinking of looking at Articles 14, 29, and 30 as just really easy things that we could look at that make sense. 14 being, these are just my notes on here, but 14 is public property defacement, dealing with things like the skate park, especially with the new cameras going in. It might be nice to try to figure out how to have an ordinance for that. 29 is the screening of solar facilities, which I think most municipalities are starting to pick up because you're not protecting
I just
under.
have a cramp in my leg, so I'm gonna
Any-
just walk for a minute.
The Public Service Board would rely on our having an ordinance in order to even have an opinion in any of the proceedings for anybody doing any kind of power plants. We have to actually have something, some kind of document. I know Bennington spent a long time considering what they wanted. And 30 is property maintenance ordinance,
Actually, I've got-
which I think would be really helpful, especially in the Main Street house that keeps coming up at every
Right.
other meeting, that you actually need to have a maintained property. Those were 3 that I looked at as if I actually went down in the weeds on those and tried to figure out how we could blanketly adopt them, you know, replacing Bennington with North Bennington where appropriate, and then go talk to Dan, talk to Rob, and figure out how we could go through that process if you all thought that that made sense to proceed with just those for the time being. Or if you had other suggestions or didn't like those.
Yeah, I like the idea of passing ordinances like these. I think the one question that came up in my mind on a couple of other articles, not necessarily those ones in particular, but like for instance with let's see, I think it was
I can pull them up too. I've got it in my email.
establishing a historic preservation commission, like with the trouble that you have getting volunteers to volunteer for the existing commissions, is creating a new one going to be
Yeah, I don't think we
more-
want to do that necessarily.
well, but then I reviewed there was a different one that that you couldn't enforce a different ordinance unless you had
Had
a
a historic
historic
preservation.
preservation commission. So I think that's why they probably did that. But I think that would have been let's see.
But all that can be done in a blanket thing too, where if you adopt ordinance X, replacing North Bennington with Bennington and removing the requirement to
Yeah.
have a historic preservation commission. We get, once I get down into actually looking at all the language of each of the ones that we think we might want to look into,
Yeah.
we can look into customizing them however we would need to. Which is why I thought if we started with just the really easy, obvious stuff, we could at least have a real conversation about how we might do that so that everybody could see how we could do it.
Yeah. And I can't. Yeah, I can't think of a reason. I mean, the purpose of having, for instance, the public property defacement ordinance would be that we could choose if we thought we wanted to try and enforce that ordinance in some situation other than.
It gives us the ability to impose fines. We don't necessarily have that ability now. So there could be police, civil case, or criminal case restitution, but there's no fine per se, necessarily. So we may want to think about having that. And that's where I would go in, and if we said, okay, let's look at 14, 29, and 30, I would put those together as documents so that we could look at, everybody could review at home what those would look like, and then we could vote on that once we had a completed set of, we could want to look at this one, these 3, 5, whatever it is, we can do it. I think we're probably going to end up piecemealing it together anyway, just because it's going to be easier to look at, to focus on certain things rather than trying to do 25 at a time.
Yeah, you couldn't
It's just too
possibly.
much. Yeah, this will take the next year to get through probably.
And for the screening of solar facilities, does that, it seems like, how detailed is the ordinance that Bennington has on that one? Does it require a process for anybody that's proposing to build?
Right now, the
Solar
reason you
projects?
need to have that is because if somebody wants to build a solar facility, they're going to go through the Public Service Board, and we have zero say.
When you
Period.
mean,
Like,
when you
we
mean-
have no say in the matter because we have no ordinance governing
okay,
that.
so when you say a facility, that's not putting up a solar
No,
panel?
I don't believe it's on your
Okay.
house. No, I need to look at it.
Okay.
This was a big deal, and I think the biggest deal was Rutland. If you recall, about a year and a half ago, Rutland sent out the Rutland resolution, which we also signed on because Rutland did not have an ordinance. And so the solar facility was built however they wanted to build it because there was no standard. So we could have the same thing happen next week because we have no standard. So we can't hold somebody to a standard that doesn't exist.
Right.
And we actually are not, we don't preside over that. The Public Service Board does. So we really have no
You would
say
have no
because we
say.
haven't actually
Yeah.
written it
Yeah.
into law in effect. It is the Wild West in that regard. We don't have any governing documents. You might hang your hat on like construction techniques and things like that, or aesthetics or historic district, but outside of those kind of rough framework, you have no governing doctrine to say, here, we have a standard, you need to screen this from, the view from Bark and Color, or whatever that
Right.
is.
Yeah, and I guess it would seem to me that unless you start to look at the details of it, you wouldn't even know what question to ask or what risk you might have.
Right, and that's where I'm asking, like, which ones make sense, so that
Right.
before I go looking at, there's some of these that just make no sense whatsoever. I can't remember one, but there's some that just make no sense for
Right.
us to adopt. So I don't
Yeah.
want to waste any time on the ones that make no sense. I want to put time into the ones that
Right.
at least a couple of you think might be worth pursuing.
I don't think that it makes sense in our village to create I think it was like a public trash collection, whatever.
Right, and I think you're looking at 28, and I think we're already actually covered. When I read it, we may already be covered by Bennington's ordinance. But, or maybe not.
think it was-
I need to
Municipal
go
solid
into that.
waste,
I
that
think it
one.
was Article 8, regulating the collection,
Gotcha.
transportation, and disposal of solid waste.
Yeah.
But are you just looking to see whether those 3 would be a good place to start?
Yeah, I'm just looking for 1 or 3 of them, somewhere for me to start where we could come up with a tangible result. Even if it was a vote of no, we would have gone through the process with a few of them
Yeah.
that might as well start with the easy ones were my thought. And I don't want it to be my opinion necessarily. And I don't want to do too many more than 3 just because I want
Right.
the process will be long enough in the beginning to start with.
Okay, well, yeah, then, I think those are issues that I would be interested in looking into.
You're
So
looking
it's
at
the 30, which ones? It was,
14, 29, and 30.
okay.
Okay, so you're fine if not that you're gonna say yes in the end, but if I start to pursue those as
Yeah.
real things that we vote on, those would be things that you think might be worth discussing. Okay, that'd be great. Thank you very much. That's all I was looking for, really.
Mhm.
And then as we pick them all off, I'll come back to you and we can talk about adding more once I figure out how we might do this.
Yeah.
So what are the names of those ordinances?
14 is public property defacement. 29 is screening of solar facilities. And 30 is property maintenance ordinance.
I have this up, Lori. I'll forward it to you. You have it, but I'll forward it to you right now. That way you have it handy.
Perfect, yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
She can have this one. She can-
Sure.
I have mine.
Here, you want this one?
Sure.
Just got it.
Oh, she's got it. Okay. Okay.
I circled the dots.
Oh, good,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to make a little
That's
bit of
great.
progress on
Thank
this,
you.
however small.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's a good conversation to have, and certainly we, warn it for a public meeting
Yeah.
and see if we want to get into the solar regulation business and,
Yep.
what the stakes are there. Because like you said, if it means we can participate in a broader regulatory process, that's a lot different than just, us as a board thinking, oh, we should, regulate a certain project. Well, if the village thinks we should, then okay,
Right.
we should, but if they think we shouldn't, then we don't need to. But it's good for a presentation to be made to the village so that we can make an
Yeah.
informed decision about
Mhm.
whether we do or we don't do
Yep.
that. Okay, any other business or any need to go into executive session? I don't think so, and I'd prefer to avoid executive session anyway, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I second it.
And without objection, we'll
That was an easy one. I